It's no good any longer just throwing up your hands and saying that's just the way EMS is. It's no good saying it's somebody else's problem. You know, it's something that we all need to work on. As a civilization, as a civilized society, we need to address this issue, and we need to do it quickly.
This episode of EMS One-Stop is brought to you by Lexipol, the experts in policy, training, wellness support and grants assistance for first responders and government leaders. To learn more, visit lexipol.com. That's lexipol.com.
I cannot imagine from what I see being done out there every day that people are talking about this, you know. It's like they're burying their head and like, what do you think is gonna happen? Like, this is gonna go back to normal? Or all of a sudden, you know, a whole generation of people, like, we're gonna go into EMS. There's very low incentive to do this, you know? Like, it's physically, emotionally taxing, and the financial rewards, again, you hate to put money to it, but like, everybody's gotta make a living.
Hello and welcome back to another edition of the EMS One-Stop. I'm your host, Rob Lawrence. And first of all, Happy New Year. I hope you had a great holiday period, are back ready and refreshed for what's to come. Of course, what did we get for Christmas? We got the EMS prize. What is the EMS prize? It means we get to do it all again this year. So we look forward to that. Now, we're going to talk about Honourable But Broken, a documentary that's been created by my guest this week, Bryony Gilbey. Bryony, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Rob. It's good to be back.
Yes. Now, we've done a podcast on this before, way back when you were in the middle of sort of production. You had produced a number of teasers, and one of these you would have already seen in the start of the show. But just take us back to the beginning and A, introduce yourself, and B, give us the nugget of the idea that you had to produce this documentary based on your experience and obviously that of your family and, of course, that of New York.
Absolutely. This is, I have a background in long news format production, 60 Minutes and ABC News productions in the past. This is something that came into my life in the form of my children, really, but also neighbors and friends who were part of our volunteer ambulance corps in the town where I live. And as I was speaking to people who were involved, I really sort of was shocked at not just the job, which I sort of understood but really didn't, but also the pay levels and the benefits packages and all the things that come with it. And I decided, because this was not a story that was being given enough attention, that I would try and look into it and see if I could do something with it. It's really surprising in this day and age to find a story this compelling that isn't being covered. So I kind of ran with it. I decided to do it on my own as an independent film, working with Rich Diefenbach and a very good editor. We started looking into doing a sort of a day in the life of someone in EMS, and it rapidly transitioned into more of an essay type documentary. My daughter, who isn't in the film, is a paramedic now and was very helpful in introducing me to people that she worked with. My neighbor at the time, Dan Blum, was also helpful in a lot of ways, background and also making introductions. Our county executive, George Latimer, and Richard Wishney, as Commissioner of EMS, opened doors for us at the local hospitals. And then at the federal level, we were fortunate enough to partner with the NAEMT, and they gave us access to their board at EMS on the Hill that first year to talk about what was going on around the country and what they were doing along with the American Ambulance Association to try and push for new legislation and push for EMS leadership within legislative areas. So the story kind of built on itself in that regard. And here we are today with a piece that is an hour, but it's packed full of information. And it's really been well received both in the EMS community and outside by people like me 3 years ago who had absolutely no idea what EMS does and how it's structured.
So that's a good point to segue into my next question. And we'll mention NAMT and AAA and the partnership they and others have formed and the calls to action after the break. But obviously, what you've done is told a story pretty much from the layperson's view. Obviously, as you said, you had no sort of idea other than hearing from your daughter about the issues of EMS. So once you started digging, what did you, the investigative layperson, journalist, filmmaker find?
I found that I had made a lot of assumptions. Again, I think as most people do, that EMS and the police and fire, the 911 first responders, were basically part of a single group. I sort of had lumped them all together as in terms of their the respect that they were given and the pay that they were given and the benefits packages that they're given. And I found that that was not the case at all, which is really disappointing and shocking. And I felt bad about myself, honestly, that I didn't know more about this. Certainly there are stories out there. It's not an unknown, but it's just not getting the spotlight that it requires. So that was really shocking, and also meeting the people who work in EMS at all levels just are incredible people, as you would expect. But I don't know how they stay in it, to be honest. I have nothing but admiration for people who work in EMS because it's a wonderful job, but it's also incredibly grueling, both physically and mentally. And there's very little tangible benefit to staying in it.
And I think those that are listening or watching this know that. But of course, what we need is people like you to tell the story. And we are always and often accused of being, almost reluctant to tell our story, that we're bad of telling our story. Of course, in the news cycle these days, it doesn't take much. One story's up and then it's gone and then we're forgotten about again. But hopefully something like this will be a tool, in fact, that we can use to let our elected officials at no matter what level listen to, that we can maybe send it or draw attention to it to our local media outlets. And it's something that I hope that you will be able to get into more of a prime time environment to just help us continue to tell the story. How can we see the finished product? Obviously, we've seen the teaser trailers. We've got them in this show as well. Where can we go right now to be able to actually see the finished product?
Yes, so for people who are working in EMS and working to educate their legislators, there is an ability to download a link through Prodigy EMS. We are, at the moment, we're keeping it in that narrow field of access because we are still trying to get it on a national platform so that we can educate people in EMS, because as you said, it's not enough for people in EMS to know what's going on. They already know what's going on, preaching to the choir. People outside of EMS need to know, one, so they can show some respect to the services, but also because we need them to lobby their legislators at all levels. I think that's going to be a really powerful weapon, and whatever the film does to help with that, is wonderful. So yes, it can be used. There is a paywall because I think that will help with getting. The argument there is it will help to get larger audiences and encourage people to bring their legislators, county executives to a screening. It can be used as a fundraiser. But we do not want to dilute the possibility of getting on a bigger platform for the public to see. But yes, my love that it can be used in this kind of capacity. I really thoroughly encourage that.
So I hope we'll actually have a screening at the 2024 NAMSP in Austin. We're just finalizing and confirming that, but we'd love for our physician colleagues to come in and view it. And as you said, this will be an excellent opportunity to have screenings so people can come in and watch. And I think already you've actually done that though, right? You've actually been to Congress, I think.
Yes. We were invited by the EMS caucus to show the film November 1st. And we had, we had a representative from New Jersey, and we had a number of legislative aides, and we had a ton of federal representation from CDC, DOT, Air Force EMS, a number of organizations, and they were all there, to support and to see what could be done, how they could help. And we've made a tremendous amount of contacts from that. But also just from the link through Prodigy EMS, which went out a week ago Monday, I think we've had some almost 40 requests for screenings from Oklahoma to Illinois to California to New York State. I mean, it's across the country. People are organizing screenings for their legislators, and that's a really great development.
Well, I have an event coming up in California in a few months' time at the state capitol. Maybe we'll do a showing there as well. You did the showing on the Hill. You mentioned you made a lot of contacts, but what was that kind of initial reaction? What was the first comment that the viewers in the room came up and said to you afterwards? Obviously, you may have had a Q&A, I don't know, but what was the initial gut reaction from the people that were watching?
Initially, there was a very visceral response, a lot of tissues being used. There were a few, people that really were moved. And including myself, I did not really expected to tell a story. I did not think that it would have quite this reaction. It's a little emotional thinking about it, but it makes me feel tremendously proud that we created something that makes people who work in EMS feel like they've been acknowledged and seen and represented. And people who were on the periphery of the services, I think were quite shocked. I think you can hear stories, but I think when you see, and that's the power of film, when you sit in an audience and you together experience some real pain and real fear from a very compelling human being, it makes a big difference.
It does.
And I think that was the response that we got, was that we put a very human face on these issues.
You did, and obviously one of the continuing themes throughout the documentary is that of John Mondolo.
Yes.
It's one of provider behavioral health, mental health, and just the pure stress, particularly around the times of COVID. But there's always stress in EMS, and I think we had Matt Zavadsky talking about the fact that we go from emotional trauma to trauma to trauma to trauma every single day. It's people are having their once in a lifetime event. We're seeing that once in a lifetime event 5-6 times a day. But John Mondolo is the sort of one of the underlying themes of the documentary. And let's just take a second to listen to that or watch, if you're on YouTube, that particular trailer.
John was a joy in my life, and that has been taken from me, and his joy is gone from my family, and it will never be the same. The loss of a child, first of all, shouldn't supersede the parent. And then to, have him die with so much on his mind and so much troubling him, that's something that will never leave me. And time does help, but it's rough for a long, long time. On behalf of John, I'd like things to get better. I don't want his death to be in vain. I try every day to take care of myself so that the rest of the family can prosper. But I miss him.
Bryony, that's very, very powerful. You've probably seen that many, many times, but when you watch that, what does it make you feel and think?
It never gets easier. And I can't imagine as a mother having to go through that. And I know Eileen and I have become friends through this, and I know she's surrounded by wonderful family members, but John is always missing. And I'm really impressed by her. I mean, it gets me choked up every time, but I'm really impressed that she was able to get through an interview and to see that sharing her story could potentially continue John's legacy of helping people, because that's really what he wanted to do. And in this way, he still is. He's still showing to people outside, to the general public, what these circumstances can do. And he was a young, vibrant, intelligent, loved young man. And if it can happen to him, it can happen to pretty much anyone. And it happened. There was another suicide in FDNY EMS last week.
It's exceptionally powerful, and you just mentioned something I was going to say there, that he wasn't the first, he isn't the only, and sadly, he probably won't be the last, because of the stresses of the role, because of the things we have to see, because of the post-traumatic stress injury that occurs throughout the job. And of course, that's a major part. We do what we do because I believe it's not a job, it's a way of life. I think that we do this for the love of helping other people. But of course, that comes at a cost. And certainly John is sadly but one example of the price that we pay. But again, it makes the whole documentary compelling. It actually make for the viewer. We can all relate to that. We now all have a number, not many degrees of separation to somebody who's had some sort of post-traumatic stress injury, who's had to leave the job because of the pressures of work, and dare I say, have ultimately taken their lives, and that is incredibly sad. But I think to tell our story, this is a part of the story we have to tell.
It absolutely is. I think most of us, lay people, can understand what we went through during COVID. It was traumatic for all of us. And you multiply that to the power of 100 is what people as first responders were going through, particularly frontline medical workers. But I think it is important to tell the story. And I think that's why Eileen decided to share it, because it really is, he isn't an anomaly. He really is. John is really an example of just how bad it is. And I think on any given day, that could be any number of people in EMS. It really is sometimes at the whim of a bad call or coming down with COVID, and that's the final straw. And I think we really need to address so many issues in the mental health aspects of the services. And they should have access to trained medical professionals. They should have healthcare packages. They should have support groups, and it need to work also on the kind of the structure of EMS so that it isn't something that is looked down upon, to say, I'm not coping well. We need to have all those services available. That's just a basic need.
So I intend to dedicate this particular episode of EMS One-Stop to the memory of John Mondolo and others like him. But before we carry on, Bryony, and to allow us to have a moment to recover, let's just have this message.
Lexipol empowers first responders and public servants to best meet the needs of their residents safely and responsibly. Serving more than 2 million public safety and government professionals in over 8,000 agencies and municipalities, Lexipol offers a range of solutions that includes policies, training, behavioral health resources, news and analysis, and grant assistance services for law enforcement, fire and rescue, EMS, local government, and other agencies dedicated to public safety. To learn more, visit lexipol.com. That's LEXIPOL.com.
Welcome back. You're listening to the first EMS One-Stop of the year with my guest, Bryony Gilbey, and we're talking about Honourable But Broken. But before we carry on, remember that you can hear us on Apple Podcasts. Also, if you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, flick over to YouTube at the EMS One channel, where we're also a vodcast. So you not only can you hear us, you can see us. I also put up slides, images. Obviously, the trailers that we've talked about today are in full on the YouTube version of the video. So please like and subscribe if you're listening to us. Look at your phone right now. There's a little plus mark at the top of your screen. Hit that. That means you've subscribed. So every time an episode of EMS One Stop drops, then you get notified that we're here. So please do that. Please also take an opportunity to give us a great review, to give us 5 stars, and put us up the searchability, as they say. So Honourable Broken with Bryony Gilbey. Thank you for that discussion prior to the break. Obviously, other folk appear in this documentary. We have pretty much the NAMT board. During the time that you film this, obviously the NAMT board rotate around, but the likes of Bruce Evans, Maria Bierman-Foat, Matt Zavadsky, all feature in that. They all have some fairly powerful messages to talk about, and just to pick some off the top, they talk about recruitment, retention, and retirement. Certainly, in my view, we're working on the recruitment, we're working on the retention, but we very rarely get to the retirement. And I think that's one of the things we need to create a longevity in EMS. And I think you convey that message very, very well.
Yes, I mean, I think it's, as I say, it's not a career that you can really retire from. It's certainly prohibitive in many respects, because there just isn't the level. You just can't make a living for the most part. And those that do are really burning themselves out, doing back-to-back-to-back shifts in different agencies. So it's really something that we need to fix. That there will be a cost to it, of course, because it's been left unattended to for so long. But there are some real costs, both financial and from a personal level, personal perspective. There's some real costs to not doing something about it. And I think that we are working on trying to get some data to try and figure out, what the economies of scale and all those lovely things would be if you did improve streamline some of the services. Certainly in the New York State level, that's something that I'm working on with a group. But also that we're talking about John Mondolo, the very human cost, and it doesn't even need to be that extreme. It's just people burning out, people feeling tired, not spending time with families, all those things. And on the other side, in the general public side, you're getting longer call times, and you're getting people that are being brought to the hospital, if at all, by an ambulance in worse state because they weren't attended to in a timely manner. And I think it was Matt Zavadsky that said, what is the cost of a human life? That's a very real cost.
I think I'm going to jump in there because just to finish Matt's quote, and I think this is the really important bit, what is the cost of a human life to a politician? Absolutely. And I think that's the key piece. And thank you for saying that, Matt, because of course, none of this happens. And we come back to one of the Rob soapboxes of the year, which is it all comes down to 3 little words, all in favor. If we don't get the vote, we don't get the permission, we don't get the money, we don't get the change, and so we have to be able to lobby effectively, and this is one tool to enable us to do that. This is another club in our golf bag, another tool in the box to help us to tell the story. And so thank you for doing that, but I think it's vitally important. Another area that you touch on, and it's something that I'm certainly seeing a lot in the news log that the American Ambulance Association and AIM High collect and collate, is volunteers and rurality. And normally they both go together. They're both struggling. They're both breaking down. And also looking at Becker's this week, we're seeing a lot of rural hospital closures, and not only that, but rural hospital labor and delivery, OBGYN services and facilities closing. And so you're getting hospital deserts. And what does that mean? It means longer transport times for ambulance services, which means if you have a longer transport time, you have less available in the location in which they're at, coupled with, if they're in rural areas, if they're volunteer. These things are all diminishing returns right now. And I think you draw attention to that. But again, to my mind, that's another big area we've got to focus on.
It really is. It comes down to some of these costs are relatively hidden. I think that's the point of the film, is to not only educate our legislators, but to educate the public, who will then put pressure on the legislators. Yes, I mean, I can only I think that there is a lot more willingness at this point for, I mean, EMS is so siloed, or has been so siloed, but that's no longer a good enough excuse for what's going on. And I think that there's a real push now for conversations. I mean, certainly whenever we've had a small local screening, the Q&A quickly becomes less about the film and more about, well, here's what I'm seeing in my county, and here's what I'm seeing in my, whether it's volunteer, hospital-based, fully professional. I mean, it's private services. We need to work together. And yes, if you change one law to help volunteer ambulance corps, you might not benefit private agencies. But then, maybe we change another law to if we all work together and make a legislative package where we all benefit. That's something that we're working on in New York with a number of county and state legislators, to try and have conversations about it, because simply saying, oh, that's just EMS, or we're so siloed, it's never going to work, it doesn't get us anywhere. It's conversations have to be had, language has to be developed, and we have to just be open to maybe not getting exactly what we want the first time round.
And of course, what we're seeing, and this is going to be another one of my writing op-eds in EMS One, is the closures of 2023, because of all of the things we're talking about, that diminishing return. We've seen, I don't know whether it's a record number, but certainly a considerable number of agencies, mostly in the rural environment, closing because there's no people, and more importantly, there's no money and funding. Again, Robism, stand by. EMS is a business, like it or not, because even not-for-profit doesn't mean all for free. You have to have that cost of readiness, and you discuss that in the documentary. The fact that we show up at one person's house in a day, we've had to be there 24 hours to wait for that call. There's a cost in people. There's a cost in equipment. If you try and buy an ambulance these days, there's going to be sticker shock, I can tell you, because that is an immense cost. All of these things add up. And of course, the reimbursement that goes with that doesn't add up. And of course, there's a lot of legislating from all of our national associations and again, I'll talk about that in a second, but it's just a snowball that seems to be growing and rolling faster and faster down the hill right now.
Yes, as a one of our board members, I won't name him, but he has a lovely phrase, which is that the math ain't mathing. And I think that's exactly right. It's amazing that it's lasted as long as it has. And I think if it was sort of a more unified service in terms of the way that it's structured, I think that they would have been on strike, and like the nurses or the United Auto Workers unions would have had a tremendous strike and pay rise by now. That's just not the way it's structured, unfortunately. But yes,
Yeah.
it's really incredible when you do start to look at real data. It's incredible that there are any services still functioning, and they do need to be paid for, for treatment in place and for canceled calls and all those hours that they put in, that don't result in a trip to the hospital, which is more often than not, probably the best result. And to urgent care center treatment and to transport to urgent care centers. That is all something that is hugely beneficial to society, to patients. And I know that the hospitals don't love that because obviously they make a tremendous amount of money from their ER. But that's something that has to be addressed. If the work isn't paid for, then it's not going to be done. Eventually, it's not going to be something that we can count on. So
You said something profound there that really crosses over with the conversation we've just had, that hospitals may make a lot of money from their ER, and when they don't, they close them. And we've seen that in just go to Becker's review, which of course looks very much at the hospital side of news, and you'll see they are closing with amazing regularity. Now, of course, it's kind of call to action time, and I went through both NAMT and AAA's legislative agenda for next year. And what this is what they've got on the go, and obviously using this documentary to help push the legislative agenda. And of course, the legislative agenda means that can get us those three little words, get things changing. But here's what's on the go right now, and you touch on some of this. EMS Counts Act. This is what NAMT are up to. EMS Counts Act. We don't actually know how many providers are out there providing. So therefore, and again, this is a Department of Labor statistics piece of work to actually work out, well, is he a firefighter? Is he an EMT? Is he a paramedic? Is he a firefighter paramedic? So we've got to work that out. Tip and Tad, you mentioned treatment in place and transport to alternate destinations. Again, to be reimbursed mostly, and actually there are some states now, Bryony, that have dry run, the ability to bill for a dry run, so treatment sort of arrive on scene. Again, we're actually surveying that. There are a few out there, but in the main, Tip and Tad. And again, here's a Robert. Let's just get rid of the acronyms, please, because if I said Tip and Tad to a politician, they have no idea what I'm talking about. So treatment in place and treatment to alternate destinations. The Siren Grant, really important. It's about funding rural public safety, and so we need to push for that extension of the Siren Grant. Medicare ambulance relief, again, if we don't get paid, we can't pay our people. EMS workforce shortage, obviously there's a major issue there, and I'm now on to what the AAA are up to. Balance billing legislation, obviously what we want to do there, and that sounds like the big bad ambulance companies, what we want to do is take the patient out of the middle. It's as simple as that. It's what the insurance give us versus what it costs to actually do the job. And this is where some of these shortages are occurring, because we know the cost of readiness, but we just get what those companies, I'll leave it there, think the rate should be. And in fact, we know it's not correct. And so we're working on that. Obviously, getting reimbursement from the VA, we're luckily that's been extended. So there's a lot of legislative agendas going on just to keep us solvent. And obviously this will help, the documentary, shall I say, will help really, promote what we're up to our legislative officials. And so I think, what you've done is going to help us get all of that stuff done. And by the way, you mentioned associations. I've been very lucky to be sort of at the federal level with working with NAMT, with NEMSP. And again, I said no acronyms, and here am I acronyming. Here we go. So with the National Association of EMTs, National Association of EMS Physicians, American Ambulance Association, International Association of Firefighters, International Association of Fire Chiefs, try saying all that in one breath, have, all work together in terms of the legislative agenda. And some people way back when, and I was one of those critics that said we have this alphabet soup of associations, right, and they don't get on, and they're like cat and dog, etc. Actually, around the pandemic, there was a meeting of the minds. There was a discussion. Let's agree on what we don't agree, let's agree on what we can't agree on, and then move on the stuff that we can. And that's the legislative agenda. And I'm delighted to see that those alliances continue to this day. But I think, Bryony, that this is going to add to that push. And so thank you for doing that.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm delighted that it can be used in that capacity. I just think the more people know, the better chance we have of educating and advocating for this truly just cause. And conversation is important, as you said. Not everyone's going to win out every time, but if we can talk and figure out, ways to help each other and see some of the benefits to everybody from changing some of the legislation and promoting legislation, and then everybody wins ultimately.
So honorable but broken, very, very powerful. And we can't go without talking about your narrator. If you haven't listened to it, who's the narrator and how did you get hold of this narrator?
Our narrator is Sarah Jessica Parker. She, like most things in this film, she came to us on a wing and a prayer through a contact. And I had actually met a wonderful paramedic called Alana Badgley, who is a local union president in Lower Westchester and a tremendous force of nature. And her uncle actually happened to be Sarah Jessica Parker's sound engineer. So when we were looking for a big name to try and push our film into a bigger spotlight, they reached out, and Sarah Jessica Parker gave us her time for free, and she narrated, and she did a beautiful job, so professional, such a lovely person. And it really made an incredible difference to the our publicity and our outreach. So I can't thank her enough. She did it when she was incredible, in a very busy time in her life, but whatever amplifies the message, we're going for. And again, it was just one of many free services that were provided to the film, for which, we couldn't have done it without that. Honestly, it was a self-financed project, and it wouldn't have happened without some donated services. So that one definitely launched the film into a different stratosphere.
And you've dropped names also. You also had some assistance from Derek in terms of the filming and the stills particularly.
Oh, Derek, yes. Derek is another salt of the earth angel, but he's a veteran and a medic. Derek Hanley created this wonderful book. Then we used the pictures. He's done our website. He created our whole website and is maintaining it for us. Just a wonderful person, and is actually working on also some EMS promotional materials separately that we're going to promote too. So it's definitely a very symbiotic process, and also with Bound Pre and with the EMS Memorial Fund and the EMS FDNY Help Fund. I mean, all these organizations have helped us, and in turn, we've been trying to promote them. So.
Yeah, and two reasons to be proud. One, that of course Derek uses a lot of the stills from my old organization, Alameda County, where I was the COO. So it's great to see, some of my former colleagues, and of course my home team Prodigy is a sponsor now, and of course everything can be seen on Prodigy, and we'll put the links in the show notes for all of that. But for those listening, Bryony, how can we get onto the website and really read all about it?
Yes, the website is honorablebutbroken.org. And we're also on social media, Facebook and Instagram, Honorable But Broken, and on Twitter, X, Honorable Broken. And those will have links to everything that we've talked about today. Yes, I would like I feel like I'm giving my Oscar speech and I forgot to talk about Prodigy, but Prodigy was our inflating my own ego, but Prodigy was our sponsor from the very beginning. They were our first sponsor, and they donated a ton of body cam video that made the film possible. So we're very glad to have our film on their platform now.
Like all things that's good in EMS, a team effort always wins. So I'm glad that you gave a shout out to all those that have been involved. Before we go, I'd like to ask everybody for their kind of final thoughts. Obviously, we've talked about the video. We've heard and seen some clips from it. But what's the one takeaway you want people to take away right now?
I think my one takeaway would be that this is not a problem that's going to go away. And we can no longer afford, any of us, to ignore it. So for me, it was something that when I was aware of it, I had to do something. And I hope that people from this film take from this film that message that you have to do something. It's no good any longer just throwing up your hands and saying that's just the way EMS is. It's no good saying it's somebody else's problem. It's something that we all need to work on as a civilization, as a civilized society. We need to address this issue, and we need to do it quickly.
That was very powerful, and that's going to make an amazing soundbite. So thank you. And that's about all for now. So thank you for watching EMS One-Stop and listening to EMS One-Stop. I'd like to thank my guest, Bryony Gilbey. Honourable but Broken can be seen at the links in the show notes or indeed on the screen right now. For the moment, Bryony, thank you very, very much indeed for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Rob.
So that was EMS One-Stop. Thank you to my guest, Bryony Gilbey. I've been Rob Lawrence. Until next time, bye for now.